My name is Charlotte Pierce, and some days I still wake up before dawn with the sound of sirens echoing in my head. Outside my apartment window, the Manhattan skyline is streaked in the soft lavender of early morning, but inside my chest the ache is anything but gentle. The world believes I'm composed, an independent consultant who runs high-stakes negotiations for tech firms, a woman who always shows up in a pressed silk blouse and never misses a deadline. They don't see the years of silence I carry like a scar. This morning, my phone buzzes against the marble counter while the coffee machine hums. The screen flashes a name I haven't seen in nearly 4 years, Mom. For a heartbeat, my breath catches. I almost let it ring out, but a muscle memory stronger than pride wins. I swipe. Her voice trembles, an unfamiliar crack in a woman who always sounded unshakable. Charlotte, we need to talk. It's your father. He wants us to come up. We miss you. Miss me. The words taste bitter. For years ago, they missed something else. They missed the funeral of my husband, Ethan, and our 2 little girls. They chose balloons and sheet cake for my brother's 32nd birthday over the sound of earth falling on 3 coffins. I pressed the phone tighter, nails biting my palm. Now you miss me? My voice is steadier than my heart. The city wakes outside, horns, footsteps, life moving on, while I stand frozen, the ghosts of my family nearer than my parents ever were. 4 years ago, life ended on a gray October morning. I'd been halfway through packing school lunches when the phone rang, a call from a number I didn't recognize. A highway patrol officer's voice, careful and flat, cut through the soft clatter of the kitchen. There'd been an accident on the Hudson River Bridge. My husband Ethan's SUV had been struck head-on by a drunk driver. My daughters, Lila and June, were in the back seat. I remember the way the butter knife slipped from my hand and clanged against the granite counter. How the sunlight through the curtains suddenly looked sharp, cruel. Hours blurred into hospital hallways and antiseptic air. Machines beeped with a rhythm that mocked my own heartbeat. When the doctor finally stepped forward, his eyes gave me the answer before his words did. 3. All 3 of them. Gone. In the days that followed, people from every corner of our lives came forward, neighbors bringing casseroles, Ethan's co-workers with quiet hugs. But the people I needed most were busy. Mom called 2 nights before the funeral. Her voice was bright with forced cheer. Charlotte, honey, we've been talking. It's your brother Mark's birthday Saturday, and, well, you know how we always do a big family dinner. We'll come up on Sunday instead. I thought I'd misheard her. The funeral is Saturday, Mom. A pause, then a sigh. Sweetheart, Mark's already made plans. Everyone's expecting it. We'll honor Ethan and the girls in our hearts, of course. But life goes on. The phone nearly slipped from my grasp. My chest burned as if a fist had struck me. When I told her it wasn't acceptable, when I begged, she repeated it like a mantra. Life goes on. On the morning of the funeral, I watched the doors of St. Augustine's Church open to friends, colleagues, even distant acquaintances. But the pew where my parents should have sat remained empty, like a cruel exclamation point. After the service, I sat alone beside 3 fresh graves, damp soil clinging to my shoes. The October wind lifted a single white rose from Lila's casket and rolled it toward me. I picked it up, its petals chilled and trembling like my own hands. My grandmother's voice floated back from childhood. When the people who should hold you close turn away, you plant your own roots and let them grow where the sun finds you. I pressed the rose to my chest and whispered to the cold air, I will. That evening, I closed the door on my parents' world. I didn't just bury Ethan and the girls. I buried the last fragile hope that my parents would ever choose me. Grief has a strange texture. At first it's all jagged edges that slice when you breathe, but eventually it hardens into something you can lean against. In the weeks after the funeral, I woke each day to a silence, so complete it rang in my ears. Lila's pink sneakers still sat by the door. June's stuffed rabbit sagged on the couch. I couldn't bring myself to move them, not yet. But my grandmother's words, plant your own roots, kept nudging me awake when despair threatened to pull me under. I'd always been a quiet strategist, the one Ethan called his architect of possibilities. Before the girls were born, I'd studied data science and worked briefly at a startup. Grief reminded me how much time I had left and how little of it I was willing to waste waiting for someone else's approval. I started small, a consulting gig from the corner of our dining room table. Numbers came easily. Sleep did not. I would pore over spreadsheets at 2 a.m., the blue light painting the room while the city outside lay dark and indifferent. A month into the work, an email arrived from Marion Porter, a former professor who'd heard about the accident through a mutual contact. "Charlotte," it read, "I can't undo what you've lost, but I know your mind. If you're willing, I'd like you to join a project I'm launching quietly." Marianne became more than a mentor. She was a lifeline, a woman who treated my pain not as weakness but as fuel. Together we built an analytics firm that specialized in risk modeling for global logistics, dry words for work that would soon pull in six-figure contracts. There were nights when doubt gnawed at me, when I stared at the family photos I still couldn't take down and wondered if success, without them, meant anything. But each small win, a signed contract, a grateful client, a second analyst hired, felt like laying bricks on the foundation my grandmother had envisioned. 2 years in, we landed a contract with a Fortune 500 shipping giant. By year 3, our revenue passed 8 figures. All the while, I stayed silent where it mattered. My parents sent the occasional text, holiday greetings, brief notes about Mark's promotions. I replied with polite, clipped sentences. I posted only the blandest updates online, a photo of a coffee cup on a rainy morning, a blurry skyline. No hints of boardrooms or multi-million-dollar deals. At night, when the city lights glittered outside my penthouse windows, I'd sometimes imagine their surprise if they knew. But it wasn't revenge I wanted. It was sanctuary. Proof that I could build a life no one could belittle, no matter how casually they'd once dismissed my pain. Grief had not left me. It never would. Yet it had shaped something unexpected, a quiet, unshakable strength that belonged to me alone. The invitation came in late spring, tucked between quarterly reports and a couriered contract. "Family dinner. Please come.
Dad isn't well.
We need to talk."
Mom.
For 3 days, I let the message sit in my inbox. Old habits, guilt, longing, pressed against the walls I'd built. At last I booked a ticket to the small Connecticut town where I'd grown up. Not for them, I told myself, but for closure. When the black car pulled into my parents' drive, the house looked smaller than memory, its paint a little faded, the maple tree in the yard heavier with green. I stepped out in a tailored navy coat and the quiet confidence of someone who had crossed oceans of grief and built an empire on the other side. Mom opened the door before I could knock. She looked older. Her silver hair was pinned back hastily, her hands trembling. Behind her, Dad sat in an armchair, thinner than I remembered. "Charlotte," Mom whispered, as if my name might break in the air. I set my leather toad on the table. "You said you needed to talk." They led me into the living room. The familiar smell of lemon polish and old books flooded back, memories of childhood bedtime stories, of the parents I once believed would stand beside me in every storm. Dad cleared his throat. I'm sorry for what we did. For not coming. I was afraid. I didn't know how to face it. We thought," his voice cracked. "We thought we'd have time later to make it right." The old ache flared, sharp and immediate. "You chose Mark's birthday." Mom's eyes glistened. "We were wrong. We were selfish. I can't undo it. But I want to know you again, before it's too late." I looked around the room that had once held every childhood Christmas. Then I reached into my bag and drew out a slim portfolio. "I didn't come here for apologies," I said, steady. "I came to tell you who I am now, because you never asked." I laid the documents on the coffee table, a copy of my company's latest valuation, a feature from Forbes naming me one of the country's top tech entrepreneurs, a letter from the governor recognizing my firm's contribution to the state economy. Mom blinked, as if the words blurred. Dad leaned forward, squinting. "I built this," I continued, "after Ethan and the girls died. After you didn't show up. I built a company from the ground up. We're valued at over $200 million. I employ more than 200 people. And, until now, you knew none of it. Silence filled the room, heavy, stunned. Dad finally spoke, barely audible. Charlotte, my God. Mom reached for my hand, but I held it firm on my lap. I wanted you to know that the woman you left standing alone at 3 graves didn't just survive. She rose. Their faces carried everything they hadn't said: shame, awe, a grief of their own making. For the first time in 4 years, the balance of power shifted. It wasn't revenge I tasted, but something quieter, purer, my own unshakable worth. I let the silence stretch until the mantel clock ticked like a slow metronome. Dad leaned back first, his shoulders sagging. I don't know how you did all this, he said finally. You deserved us beside you. We failed you. His voice was thin, almost childlike. For a flicker of a moment, I saw the man who once steadied my bike on summer evenings. That memory softened something in me, but only slightly. I didn't build my life so you'd apologize, I said quietly. I built it because I had no other choice. But if we're going to have any relationship from here on, there are conditions. Mom's brows knit. Conditions? Yes, I said. First, you will never again pretend that pain can be ignored because it's inconvenient. If we talk about Ethan and the girls, you will say their names. Lila.
June.
Ethan. Out loud. They deserve to be remembered. Mom's lips trembled as she whispered the names, each one a tiny exhale of regret. Second, I continued, you will stop excusing Mark's selfishness. I'm not competing for attention anymore. If he can't be present for others, that's his choice to change or not, but you won't reward him for it. Dad nodded slowly, eyes lowered. And finally, I said, my voice steady though my heart thudded, if you want to be in my life, you show up. Not with money or gifts, show up when it matters. Holidays, yes, but also the ordinary Tuesdays when I need family. Or when you do. Mom reached across the coffee table, and this time I let her fingers rest lightly over mine. Charlotte, we can do that. We want to do that. The words didn't erase the past. Nothing could. But in that moment, I felt the air shift. The power that once belonged to their approval was back where it belonged, in me. I stood, smoothing the sleeve of my navy coat. This isn't forgiveness in a bow, I said. It's a beginning. If you mean what you've said, we can start again. But only if we build it honestly. Dad rose unsteadily, his gaze meeting mine with a fragile earnestness. We'll try. We'll earn it. The mantel clock chimed, and for the first time in years the sound didn't feel like a countdown. I gathered my portfolio and stepped toward the door, not as the abandoned daughter they once overlooked, but as the woman who had already chosen her own worth. 2 months later, a soft October sun spills through my Manhattan windows, the same kind of golden light that once felt like mockery. Now, it feels like quiet promise. Mom calls every Thursday evening. Sometimes she tells me about the garden she's replanting. Sometimes she just listens. Dad sends texts with photographs of the sky at dawn. Reminds me of you, he writes. They are small gestures, but they land gently, like steady drops of rain on soil that was once dry and cracked. I don't kid myself. The past isn't erased. There will always be 3 names, Ethan, Lila, June, etched into me like the grooves of a record. But now when I speak their names, my parents echo them. We hold their memory together. This weekend they came to the city for the first time in years. We stood in my office, floor-to-ceiling glass, a sweep of skyline and river beyond. Dad ran his hand along the frame of a photograph I keep on my desk, the girls in matching yellow raincoats, Ethan behind the camera. You built all this, he said quietly. There was no disbelief this time, only a humble pride. I touched the small white rose I keep in a glass vase on the corner of my desk, the rose I saved from the gravesite that terrible day. My grandmother's words surfaced like a hymn. Plant your own roots and let them grow where the sun finds you. I smiled, feeling the truth of it settle deep. I did, I said. And I'll keep building. Outside, the city hummed, a low, steady heartbeat of possibility. I felt my own pulse match it, strong and sure. This is the life I chose. Not because they finally saw me, but because I finally saw myself.